Good day, Brigade. This is Bahbi, and we are coming at you with an episode this week called A Post-Roe Union, where we're going to be going state by state and giving a bit of information on what is likely to happen with each state if Roe is overturned, which it seems very likely. Before we get started into that, we'd like to give a shout out to AOC. If you don't know who she is in the American Union, that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I may have mispronounced that, and if I did, I apologize. And Puerto Rico on successfully gaining a plebiscite for self-determination. Yeah, the Puerto Rico question actually very well could be settled within the near future, finally. In this plebiscite, there are a couple options. The two biggest options to note, though, are statehood. Yes, Puerto Rico has the option for statehood this time, for sure. And free association state status. So some of you might be wondering what that is, and free associated state status is nominally the country is independent, but there is still a lot of great ties to it, to the country that it has associated status with. Now, the American Union, as far as I know and as my research shows, is the only nation state that uses the concept of free association states. And it's not entirely too dissimilar from the archaic vassal concept, but there are some key differences in that this free associated state does get its own say on a lot of stuff, but things like foreign affairs and big deal stuff and things like working and all that, they basically split with their associated partner. In other words, we control all the big stuff. All the little day-to-day domestic stuff is controlled by the associated state itself. But an interesting thing to note about this plebiscite is one option that's not on the table is status quo. This is why the Puerto Rico question will be settled, because Puerto Rico cannot remain where it is in this plebiscite. Now, it could very well be that lack of participation could push it to we can't actually fully conduct this, but that seems incredibly unlikely. Anyways, again, we'd like to congratulate AOC, Puerto Rico, and the Puerto Rican governor for managing to pull this off. Congratulations, and we hope to see you on our flag or as an international partner, if you so choose. And some more darker news we're going to cover here for a little bit. In fact, this is why we don't really have any background music for this part. Is the school shooting that happened yesterday in Texas. I believe leaving 19 people dead, 2 of which were teachers, 17 students, at an elementary school in Uvalde. My apologies. And yeah, at this point in time, we'd like to take a moment of silence for those who have fallen, those who have lost, and for all of those who've been victims in mass shootings overall. We'd like to thank you for your patience at this time, because no one should ever have to suffer this, and the multitude of issues within the American Union can only be serving to contribute to this absolute madness. And there are a lot of things that can be said, and a lot of issues to unpack, and we will want to cover those, but out of respect for the victims and all involved, we're going to postpone an episode like that for a little while down the road. Anyways, time to get on with the show. Alright, so as we said earlier, we're going to be talking about a post-Roe Union. Recent polling from various polls from, I believe, Quinnipiac and others like that show that approximately 54% of Americans have lost confidence in the Supreme Court since the leak. Unfortunately, odds are that the Supreme Court will stick with its decision that was more or less leaked, and will overturn Roe unless they decide to kick the can down the road or drop the question entirely. Something that, let's be honest, they can't reasonably do without creating a bigger mess politically, socially, and just overall. So, this would be a prime example of walking right into the thick of shit. Congratulations, Supreme Court. So, what is likely to happen in all 50 states? Well, we're going to cover this in alphabetical order. Alabama. Alabama would ban plus criminalize abortion per their 2019 abortion ban. In addition, the state also currently has many medically unnecessary restrictions that it also carries out. Alabama? No! Alaska. Abortion would likely remain legal in Alaska. The state's highest court recognized it as a fundamental right, but there are currently many state laws that impede access. This may seem like a surprise at first when you consider that Alaska typically votes Republican, but then when you consider the fact that Alaska's Republican vote is largely along a libertarian principle, seriously, look it up. Alaska has a very strong libertarian streak. It actually kind of starts to make a little bit more sense. Arizona. Abortion would likely be illegal. Arizona has a pre-Roe ban which would outlaw abortion if Roe is overturned. The state also has many laws in effect that limit access as well. What is it with just the South in general and not really liking the idea of social progressivism? I don't know. I probably never will know. But if we're going to keep spending time on trying to figure that out, we're going to be here all day. Arkansas. In 2019, Arkansas passed a trigger ban to prohibit abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned. Also, like many other states, this state also currently has many restrictions to impede access. Yeah, that one actually wasn't really that big of a surprise. California. California, it would remain legal. In 1969, California courts recognized the right under the state constitution, and the state has passed many laws protecting abortion access since. Interesting side note, did you know who was governor in 1969 of California? A man named Ronald Reagan. And many people might not also realize this, but Ronald Reagan is also the guy who created the concept of no-fault divorce in the United States. Interesting, right? Colorado. Colorado has neither a prohibition on abortion nor strong protections. So, abortion will likely remain accessible but without legal protection from the state. The current governor, Governor Polis, is currently taking active steps to support those seeking access from states such as Oklahoma due to their increasingly restrictive bans and all that. But this could very well shift. A lot of people like to think that Colorado is very much turned into a liberal state, but this actually isn't the case. What most people see as Colorado's liberal view is actually just the Denver metro area, and pretty much everything else around it is very much the opposite. Colorado kind of presents this really interesting example in the American Union in which you have both the urban and rural kind of coexisting within a singular state. And thus you kind of have this weird middle of the road where there's some strangely progressive thoughts and some strangely conservative thoughts, and a lot of moderate down the road and weird solutions to things. It's an interesting time. Connecticut. Abortion would remain legal in Connecticut. State law explicitly protects the right to abortion, and Connecticut has passed many additional laws since to expand access. Yeah. It's pretty cool. Delaware. Current Delaware law protects the right to abortion. Though there's an unenforced pre-Roe ban on the books, the state has amended and repealed other bans in the past. So it is entirely possible that they could do the same thing, and if Democrats have predominant control in Delaware, which I believe they currently do, this would be seen as a very likely move. Florida. Abortion may stay legal in Florida. What? Yes. Yes, it could. The state courts recognized it as a right under the state constitution. However, there are currently state laws that impede access, and one particularly angry, sectarian, authoritarian, possible fascist called Governor Florida Man, DeSantis, that pretty much hates all that stuff. Georgia. In 2019, Georgia passed a 6-week abortion ban that is currently under review by the courts. If Roe falls, they will begin enforcing the ban. Also, the state currently has many restrictions to impede access. In fact, we can give Georgia a big ol' thank you along with Texas for bringing this question back to the goddamn Supreme Court in the first place. Good luck, Stacey Abrams. Hope you can beat Kemp. Hawaii. Hawaii, abortion would remain legal. In 1970, Hawaii recognized abortion. Sorry I'm mispronouncing your name, I'm really terrible at Hawaiian. Sorry. Since then, the state has passed numerous laws expanding access. Good for you, Hawaii. Good for you. Idaho. Go fuck Idaho. Idaho enacted a trigger ban in 2020 that would ban abortion after 6 weeks in most cases if Roe fell. The state also has numerous laws in effect that restrict access. Fuck Idaho. Just fuck everything about Idaho. Seriously. A lot of right-wing extremists like to call it home. There's a place called the Citadel in which gun ownership is mandatory. They have a lot of crazy-ass neo-Nazi groups presiding up in there, and a state legislature that firmly believes in the right for an individual to marry a child. I'm not making this up. This is actually in the record in the Idaho House of Representatives that one of their representatives did in fact stop a law banning child marriage in the state of Idaho by saying, quote, "We do not want to impede on the rights of individual freedom." Again, fuck Idaho, those pedophile-loving neo-Nazi pieces of shit. Indiana. Indiana would likely ban abortion. State law does not protect abortion access, and the Republican governor signed into law in 2021 that severely impedes access. Yeah, in spite of its interesting, humble Rust Belt origins, Indiana is one of those more conservative states and does actually have a ban on abortion, or at least is aiming for it. However, you have Indianapolis itself that could provide an interesting counterbalance to that. Iowa. Abortion could remain legal as it is recognized as a right under the state constitution. Oh, what? Yeah, this one's actually another surprise too. However, there is a pending constitutional amendment to eliminate that protection moving through the legislature. 'Cause of course there is. But let me point this interesting little side note out. Did you know that in the state of Iowa, it was constitutionally legal to duel somebody up until 1996? So while Iowa may want to ban this in their constitution and remove the amendment that allows for abortion rights, it very well might not be able to do so until decades down the road because, well, they don't have a very fast track record of amending their constitution. If that example on dueling is anything to be a merit. Kansas. Abortion would probably remain legal. Yes, believe it or not, Kansas would probably keep abortion legal. A Kansas court recognized in 2019 that a pregnant person has the right to bodily autonomy. However, there is a constitutional amendment to eliminate this right to an abortion on the 2022 ballot. So, Kansas, what you gonna do? You could become one of the most progressive conservative states in the Union, which, don't let your head explode on that one. Or you can continue to be bleeding Kansas. Actually, it'd be interesting. Kansas, please do continue to cause more controversy. Not really. Seriously, just stop being assholes. Grow your wheat, stop being assholes, and keep abortion. Louisiana. Abortion would probably become illegal. Louisiana has passed many restrictions, including a trigger ban to prohibit abortion in nearly every situation if Roe falls. This comes as a surprise to literally nobody. Maine. Abortion would likely remain legal. Maine law includes many protections for abortion, like public funding. Good for you, Maine. And you have consensus voting. You know, Maine's starting to look like a good model. You keep it up, Maine. You build a cooperative economic system and we can talk some more. How about that? Maryland. Abortion would probably remain legal. Maryland law includes many protections for abortion, like public funding as well. Again, good on you, Maryland. Massachusetts. Abortion would remain legal. In 2018, Massachusetts repealed a pre-Roe abortion ban, and the state Supreme Court recognized the right to an abortion under Massachusetts Constitution. Man, say that one 5 times fast. Massachusetts Constitution, Massachusetts Constitution. Okay, yeah, no, that's pain. Michigan. Michigan lawmakers would likely try to prohibit abortion. Michigan has a pre-Roe ban which could outlaw abortion. If Roe fell and many laws are in place that limit access, it would likely come down to Republican lawmakers in Michigan are going to try to ban it. This does lead an interesting caveat, though, as Michigan is a very famous battleground state politically, and something like that probably wouldn't just fly with about half the population. Minnesota. Abortion would remain legal in Minnesota. The state Supreme Court recognized it as a right, but there are currently state laws that limit access, like a waiting period. You know, compared to some of the other limitations on access for some of these states, a waiting period, by comparison, could be a lot worse. I'm not saying that a waiting period's good, because it's like, what the fuck? But I mean, as far as restrictions go, that's not that bad. Mississippi. Abortion would likely be illegal. Mississippi has passed many restrictions, including a trigger ban to prohibit abortion in nearly every situation if Roe is overturned. And the SCOTUS is scheduled to hear a case on the state's 15-week abortion ban. Yeah. This should come as no surprise, but this is not at all shocking for Mississippi, probably one of the most socially backward states in the Union. This is the state that took until 1993 to ratify the amendment to the United States Constitution banning slavery. It took until 1993. Now keep in mind that once the constitutional amendment to the US Constitution has been ratified by enough requisite states, it does in fact become a part of the Constitution and is enforced throughout the entire American Union regardless of your beliefs. But this means, symbolically, Mississippi didn't recognize the 13th Amendment as legitimate until 1993. And this is a state where many people are like, oh, I'm not racist. Bull fucking shit. Bull fucking shit. But, of course, probably one of the most socially backward states in the Union. Missouri. Abortion would likely be illegal. Missouri's passed restrictions, including a trigger ban in 2019 to outlaw abortion in nearly all situations if Roe is overturned. You're starting to see a pattern here. It seems a lot of southern and midwestern states with an incredibly rural populace tend to want to ban abortion heavily. Montana. Here's an exception to that. Abortion would remain legal. There are unnecessary restrictions, but the state Supreme Court recognized the right to procreative autonomy per the Montana Constitution. So it's an exception, but only a technical exception. I wouldn't put it past such lawmakers to try to go forward and ban and end the abortion right in the Montana Constitution through a constitutional amendment, like many other states. Nebraska. It's expected that Nebraska would ban abortion. State law does not protect abortion access, and the state has many laws, including partial bans, that impede access. They also have a unicameral legislature that's predominantly dominated by the Republican Party, even though technically Nebraska legislature is nonpartisan. Yeah, you probably didn't know those two facts, but Nebraska has a unicameral legislature, also known as the Uni, which means they only have one legislative house, and in spite of it being nonpartisan, as per Nebraska Constitution, which means technically you can't run for a seat in the House as a party. You have to run as an individual. You can just gain the affiliation of a party later and have that be separate. But the Republican ideal tends to predominate within the Uni. I mean, it's Nebraska, so, go figure. Nevada. Abortion would remain legal. In 1990, Nevada voters passed a referendum protecting the right to abortion, and in 2019, lawmakers removed some restrictions to abortion access. In other words, if anything, Nevada is likely to stay legal and possibly open up even more, especially if states like Arizona decide to close off some. New Hampshire. Abortion would likely remain accessible but without legal protection from the state. In 2021, New Hampshire passed a 24-week abortion ban that included criminal penalties for healthcare providers. In other words, a bunch of Republicans took a bit of control within New Hampshire and decided, hey, we're going to try to do what other states are, but since we don't have the one-sided party favorability like those states, we're going to try to make it a, quote, compromise. A compromise. That kind of compromise. New Jersey. Abortion would stay legal. There are many unnecessary impediments, but the New Jersey Supreme Court recognized the, quote, fundamental right of a woman to control her body and destiny. And yes, that is actually a quote from the New Jersey Supreme Court. So, Chris Christie, you can finally get that abortion you so desperately need. Sorry, that was an easy target, but, Jay and Silent Bob are about the other thing New Jersey has. And Garden State, but my God, don't watch that movie. New Mexico. Abortion would likely remain legal. New Mexico's Democratic governor signed a measure in 2021 that repeals the state's pre-Roe ban. This is also interesting because, politically speaking, New Mexico's kind of been going a very similar route as Colorado and turning more towards the left. But they've also added an interesting libertarian stint to it, especially back when they elected Gary Johnson as their governor. Yes, if you were wondering how his political history was up until 2016, it started in New Mexico. And he actually was governor of New Mexico. New York. Abortion would stay legal. In 2019, New York passed progressive, comprehensive abortion protectives, including allowing public funding. Probably almost guaranteed pushed by the city itself, and probably not in most of the upstate. Upstate New York is beautiful, but it's a lot like other rural places in the United States. North Carolina. North Carolina would likely try to prohibit abortion. There's a pre-Roe 20-week abortion ban out of North Carolina that's currently being considered by the U.S. Court of Appeals after the state legislature narrowed it in 2015. In other words, the Court of Appeals is looking at it like, I don't know if we can keep this. This might be unconstitutional. Let's take a look. Appeals courts are where you go to after your first court, or your primary court, whatever it is, fails you. You go to an appellate court in order to get an appeals process going, and once that's appealed, you can, go forward. But then it can also be challenged and brought up to an even higher court. That's when you get to Supreme Courts. American judicial system will be covered in a later episode. North Dakota. Abortion would likely be illegal. North Dakota has passed many unnecessary and restrictive laws, including a trigger ban to outlaw abortion in most cases if Roe falls. Not that big of a surprise. Ohio. In 2019, Ohio passed a 6-week ban that would mostly outlaw abortion if Roe were to fall. But it was blocked by the courts. In 2021, the legislature further restricted abortion, possibly out of spite. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has restrictions on abortion and no strong protections. Abortion will likely remain accessible, but without explicit legal protection from the state, and probably some small degree bans. Again, Pennsylvania is a battleground state. This is why it kind of gets into the toss-up area. Rhode Island. Abortion would remain legal in Rhode Island. In 2019, the state passed a law explicitly protecting access. However, some unnecessary restrictions remain and probably will remain for quite a while. South Carolina. It is expected South Carolina would ban abortion. In 2021, the state passed a law banning abortion after 6 weeks, but it has since been blocked by the courts. There are numerous restrictions that hurt accessibility in the state. Considering the politically similar nature of North and South Carolina, one has to wonder why they've never bothered to unify. I guess it's not really that important, but both could take a page out of the book of the North and maybe loosen that hyper-conservatism a little bit. South Dakota. Abortion would likely be illegal. The state has a trigger ban to outlaw abortion in most cases if Roe is overturned, and the Republican governor signed multiple anti-choice measures in 2021. The Dakotas. The goddamn Dakotas. Is it too late to give that back to the Sioux and the other tribes that live there? I'd totally be in favor of dissolving those two states and making Lakota a state and giving it to the various tribes there that once previously presided over the land. I feel like we've had a stint with both the Dakotas and it hasn't really worked out, so I don't know, just a thought. Utah. Utah passed a trigger ban in 2020 that would prohibit abortion in almost all cases if Roe fell, and it has unnecessary restrictions on the books. This will likely continue and probably be almost impossible to break unless Silicon Valley decides to move to Utah. Why? Because Mormons. Decent people, a little bit conservative socially, and I don't really like that particular part. But, there are crazier people out there, and magic underwear is probably not the most absurd thing a religion's come up with. Yeah, by the way, Mormons have magic underwear. Vermont! Abortion would stay legal. In 2019, Vermont passed progressive, comprehensive abortion protections, including allowing public funding. This should come as no surprise, as Vermont has basically become the political base of Bernie Sanders. Virginia. Abortion would likely remain accessible, but without legal protection. The Democratic trifecta, basically when the Democrats controlled both legislative houses and the governorship, in Virginia rolled back multiple abortion restrictions in 2020. However, with the 2 years ago election of Gavin Youngkin, this very well could change. There's no guarantee because the legislature is still kind of split, and Virginia has become a battleground state as a result. Washington. Washington would have abortion remain legal. State law explicitly protects the right to abortion, and Washington has passed many additional laws to expand access since. Good on you, Washington. The one state with a green flag. That's also true. Washington is the only state with a green flag. West Virginia. West Virginia would likely ban abortion. State law does not protect abortion access, and in 2018, state constitutional amendment that passed determined that an abortion is not a right under West Virginia's constitution. That's okay, under the US Constitution, West Virginia is debatable as a state anyway, considering in 1863 it broke off from the rebelling state of Virginia and was promptly given recognition. However, Virginia did not approve of this, which, since it didn't, actually kind of violates the Constitution. So, say what you will, West Virginia, but your statehood's debatable as is. Wisconsin. Wisconsin has an unenforced pre-Roe ban. If Roe fell, the state could choose to enforce it. There are also many unnecessary restrictions that hurt abortion access. But, like every other Rust Belt Great Lakes state, it's a battleground, and this will likely remain up in the air for quite a while. Wyoming. Wyoming doesn't currently ban abortion, but there are many unnecessary restrictions, including one signed by the Republican governor in 2021. It would likely remain accessible, but with little protection from the state. Though, keep in mind this likely to remain accessible would probably be one of those loopholes that would end up closed within a few years because there's basically no Democratic Party in Wyoming. Now, that's not to say they don't have a party there and there aren't Democratic lawmakers and all that in Wyoming. It's just Wyoming is so heavily dominated by the conservative that any sort of Democratic idea getting through is almost guaranteed a fluke. And we did miss one a little bit, and that would be Oregon. Oregon, they would likely keep it, especially given their more progressive nature in like Portland. However, there is the case that it would turn into a pretty big issue and debate, especially with more of the right wing that live out in the rural east and the rural south. So it's kind of one of those, it could likely stay, but you're also going to be in the gray area zone. Kind of like with Colorado, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and all that. So, about 18 to 20 of the states, and we're counting two of the up-in-the-air ones here, Michigan and Wyoming, would end up with an enforced pre- or post-Roe ban and or some sort of restriction of some kind. Out of 50, that's almost 2/5. That's about 40% of the states in the union would have some form of abortion ban for Roe being overturned. About 40% of states that believe they have the right to tell a woman what they can and can't do with their body. 40% of states that believe their religion is that important enough that they can tell individual human beings who may or may not belong to that faith what they can and cannot do with themselves. 40% of states, all largely run by one party. So let me ask you this. Is it ever a good thing to let a state have greater power or autonomy over an individual's right to choose on anything than that individual themselves? And for about 90% of things in life, we'd have to say no. If you want to have the right to choose whether or not to wear a mask, that's fine. We had that debate. But just the same, you have to concede the same logic that it's a woman's right whether or not to get an abortion. And as a man, I couldn't tell you all the complications that come with pregnancy. No man could. No man could tell you all the complications that might result from such things. No man could tell you the emotional toll that is taken when one has to go through the process of getting an abortion. So for the love of fucking Christ, could you stop fucking taking people's individual right to exist and making them feel ashamed for something that might have actually very well been necessary? My God. So how about this 40% of states that believe they have the right to tell someone what they can and can't do with their body? Why don't they just continue onward? Why don't they just adopt others' restrictive measures? Why don't they just become authoritarian states in their own right? But you might want to remember, if you want to be an authoritarian state, you got to take away the guns. And I guarantee you, the same 40% of states that would tell a woman what she can and can't do with her body would also be the same 40% of states that would say, you can't tell me what I can and can't own for a firearm. Anyways, that's our episode. Thank you for listening, and I hope this has been informative for you. A large amount of our information comes from a group that tries to elect Democratic pro-choice women called Emily's List. They're a very fascinating group. They do a lot of good work for helping with pro-choice. They do a lot of great work with helping women get elected into office. And they just do a lot of great work politically all around. If you want, you can go check them out at www.emilyslist.org. I really recommend that you do and see all the things they do there. They are great people. Anyways, that's our show. Hope you had a great time. If you liked it, share us. If you hate it, share us. If you don't know how to feel about it, share us and take the temperature of your friends. See how much they hate us. And those who wish not to be tread on should mind where they step. Have a great night and a pleasant tomorrow.